Good evening to all of you. Welcome to the class. So we'll go ahead and start with chapter 1, the pay model. So when it comes to reading about compensation, about benefits, about rewards, it helps you to understand what is it that companies that are successful, that are doing the right things, and those that are not so successful, and what are they doing wrong. So if you're doing the right things when it comes to benefits and compensations, and if you're being strategic about it, you can hopefully attract the best talent to come to your company and then work there with high performance. If you're not doing it the right way, then unfortunately you're going to have problems of recruiting and retaining the right people or the best talent. So the pay model provides us an overview of the key components of compensation system. So the basics of compensation can be explored from the perspective of society, shareholders, the organization itself, as well as the external environment. And the three components are the objectives, the policy, and the techniques. And then the key is to examine the 4 policy decisions that are based on internal alignment, based on competitiveness, based on employees' contributions to the company and overall performance, and then the administration or the management of it. So if we're looking at things from these policy perspectives, the 4 components, hopefully the policy will be in alignment with the strategy of the company to achieve the mission, the vision, and good recruitment and retention of the employees. In the English language, we see compensation as something that counterbalances or offsets or makes up for something else. So that's the idea. But even compensation, the word or terminology and how it's applied or operationalized in the workplace can be seen from different perspectives. You know, what I say about my compensation may not be exactly what my boss says my compensation is, right? I may not see my compensation as fair, but you might, and my bosses might see it as fair, or they may say, well, there's actually some inequity in this, so we apologize for this. When the time comes or when we have the opportunity, we can sort of close this pay inequity so it is fair to you. But nonetheless, the perspectives can vary. But a lot of people obviously have become very rich, right? Some of them are entrepreneurs. As you can see on the screen, some of them are working for other people, or they started working for other people at the beginning. But nonetheless, in this class, there's a lot of discussion about CEO or management compensation. So when these top executives are making a lot of money, do they really deserve that? Or is it something that is not fair to the rest of the employees to pay these high salaries to top people? But if you don't pay the top people high salaries, can you attract them? Can you retain them? And can they be devoted to high performance if you reduce their salary or don't pay them as the market would? So that's the idea behind compensation. So some principles here to keep in mind is that compensation provides pay opportunities that enable flexible and effective recruitment, good management, and retention of high quality workforce. It promotes a high performance culture, hopefully, whether it's pay for performance or whether it's salary based. Nonetheless, people want to get paid fairly. So hopefully we can create a culture that is focused on best performance. And hopefully it recognizes performance of each employee and their contributions directly associated with the goals of the department or the mission of the organization. And also that it focuses on total compensation. In other words, not just about the salary that they receive on a monthly basis, but overall lifetime employment or rewards and indirect payments that are contributed to their 401k or to their health insurance or other elements of benefits. Referred to compensation as all forms of financial returns in tangible services and benefits that employees receive as part of their employment relationship with the organization that they're working with. So again, that could be financial returns in tangible services and benefits that you and I receive as part of our employment relationship with the organization. So why does compensation matter? Well, there are some companies that have high pay, and evidence shows that they actually have high productivity. On the other hand, there are other companies like Chrysler and General Motors that unfortunately had pay practices that could not be sustained. So if we make promises to employees, we're not able to deliver them long-term, obviously people will become dissatisfied, and that's not a good strategy. And then there are certain incentives that are very, very risky to the behavior of employees, managers, and executives. So as an example of this, we saw the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP, which actually discourages unnecessary and excessive risk-taking on the part of management. So we know that poorly designed compensation programs can undermine the organization's success because of employees not being happy, because of misalignment of compensation with the goals of the organization. On the other hand, we also see that a well-designed compensation system can actually help the company achieve and sustain a competitive advantage in the market, whether that is locally, nationally, or internationally. Good compensation strategies and programs do make a difference. They do matter. And we can look at compensation from the society's perspective, from the shareholders' perspective, from the management perspective, as well as from the workers' perspective. So these are 4 areas that actually you can write about in your research papers and focus on why compensation and rewards do make a difference and why we should be concerned about it. So let's look at this from society's view for a few seconds. So from the perspective of society, we can sometimes see pay and benefits in general as a measure of equity or justice. So we see that pay inequalities do exist, right? Whether it's between whites and blacks, whether it's between majority and minority, whether it's between men and women, or whether it's between those who are older versus younger, they do exist. Now, the question is, why are they sometimes so wide? Why is the gap so wide? Is it really based on credentials? Is it based on experience? Is it based on performance? Or is it actually based on inequities of institutionalized discrimination? Because we've always done it this way, we're going to continue to do it that way, despite the fact that the law says there should not be inequities based on sex, based on skin color, based on age, based on religion, based on ethnicity. So all of those legal issues that we've all studied when we got into management, or when we took some classes in human resources or business law or other classes. We can also look at compensation from job losses or gains in a country, which is partly a function of labor cost. So think about all of these issues, whether it is employees' perspective, management perspective, the stockholders' perspective, or society's perspective. It impacts us every single day. And every day you can watch the news or open the paper, you're going to see something, right, related to these issues. So think about what we saw today. You know, you got up this morning, you saw the news, or you opened the newspaper. What did you see? You see Goldman Sachs. The fact that they had 10 years of litigation on pay inequity. 10 years. Imagine going for that long and trying to argue your side that we didn't do anything wrong, and the other side obviously have their lawyers stating, no, there are some injustices that must be corrected. So we see that at the end of 10 years of litigation, they decided to settle, and they agreed to pay $215 million. $215 million. That's got to be a large sum of money. Not only the shareholders don't like that, but employees don't like that. And certainly the management of the organization does not like that. But nonetheless, the management agreed, right? That this is the best possible avenue forward instead of continuing to litigate this case and eventually losing, or continuing to litigate and continuing to get the bad publicity day in and day out, even if we end up winning in another 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. But imagine the cost associated with those litigation lawyers and staff that has to do research on your side. It can be enormous on the company. So again, compensation can have multiple perspectives. So do consider your philosophies from the shareholder's point of view, from the manager's point of view, from the employee's point of view, and what it means to each of these stakeholders or categories of people who are interested in what happens in the compensation and benefits. For example, employees can view pay as financial security, as a return in exchange, as an entitlement, as an incentive, or as a reward for their hard work and for being dedicated to your organization, to your cause, to your mission, to your platform day in and day out. So pay influences employees' motivation and behavior through incentive effect and through sorting effect. Incentive effect is the degree to which pay influences individual and aggregate motivation. The sorting effect is the effect that pay can have on competitiveness of the workforce, or the composition of the workforce that eventually makes them competitive through diversity and the diversity of ideas. So how an organization pays can result in sorting effect. Either if you're not paying very, very well pages, you're not going to get experienced top talent or diverse individuals joining your organization. So you may end up with all new employees who don't have a good learning curve in the industry. And that is very much a homogeneous group without the experience. Therefore, you don't have the competitive advantage when it comes to your organization competing with other industries. So as an organization, we have to ask, are we using the pay policy that will, in fact, attract and retain the type of employees that we want, we need, and we should have to meet our obligations locally and nationally according to laws and according to what is deemed to be moral in society? So these compensation policies work through incentive and sorting effects to either achieve or perhaps not achieve the company objectives. Obviously, if you're not achieving your company objectives, somebody has to be held responsible, and somebody has to be delegated the responsibility of bringing about those positive changes. In the global scale, we see different views on compensation. So in the US, compensation refers to the financial returns and tangible services and benefits that we receive as part of our relationship with the organization. In China, the contemporary view or meaning of compensation does actually include returns as well as entitlements. In Japan, compensation means giving something. So there are different terminologies, different words associated with these concepts around the globe. So total compensation are those transactional returns, which include pay that is received directly as cash and indirectly as benefits. Cash payment includes base pay, merit pay, cost of living adjustments, and incentives. And benefits can include pension, insurance, and programs to help balance work and life demands. And so I know there's been a lot of discussion on wellness programs nowadays. Many companies are offering that to keep us healthy, right? They're encouraging us to join a local gym or to exercise in different ways to keep us healthy, which is a positive thing. And then there are relational returns, which are psychological. It can include recognition and status, security of employment, development and learning opportunities, the fact that we're being challenged to continue researching or coming up with new ways of completing our jobs, and so on. So this model of total return is very comprehensive. Total rewards or total returns, which includes relational returns, as well as the compensation, which can be in the form of cash or benefits. So the entire semester is basically organized around this model. So as you're looking forward to the reading every single week, again, pay attention to this model, see where it fits in terms of whatever research and reading that you're involved with at a given time. But the pay model, again, as I alluded to earlier, includes the policies, techniques, and objectives. And then each of these categories, you can see how they lead to these objectives of efficiency, fairness, or ethics in compliance with the law. So I like the fact that this textbook does focus on more than the law. In other words, we need to go beyond the law. And that means being ethical, being moral, being fair from society's point of view. We need to be in compliance, because if we're not, our company can be closed down, or as managers and owners of the corporation, you can go to jail. So you can be fined heavily, right? Just like Goldman Sachs agreed to pay $250 million for pay inequity between men and women in their organization. So again, if we're not complying with the law, we can be fined. However, we need to go above and beyond that to make sure the techniques we use for paying people, whether it's seniority-based, performance-based, merit-based, or incentive-based, all of them are fairly and justly perceived by your employees. So the pay model focuses on all of these elements of efficiency, fairness, compliance, as well as ethics or justice. Pay objectives guide the design of the pay system and serve as the standards for judging success of the pay system. So the model is a nice comprehensive model. Try to understand every single element of it. It will help you in your research as well as your presentations in the future weeks. So this is another way of looking at it. The fact that alignment, competitiveness, and contributions of employees in the management or administration all leads to hopefully efficiency, fairness, and compliance. Sometimes compensation has to be looked at from a reassignment perspective. In this case, we have to look at what reassignment actually means in every company. This happens a lot because people leave, people retire, people quit, and we change departments. So are employees eligible for pay increases during the reassignment? What is an employee-initiated reassignment? What is management-directed reassignment? When will a reassignment occur competitively? Which work categories are considered equivalent for non-competitive reassignments? So promotion occurs when an employee is advanced to a higher pay band or pay grade. The question is, where do we place them compared to what they were doing already and what the market actually expects? Because if we don't treat them fairly, guess what? They're going to leave. And it's more than, just quiet leaving. Some people are just ghosting the company now, right? They don't show up at all. So if somebody gives you some warning for about 2 or 3 weeks or a month that they're leaving, that gives you some time to hire somebody else. But unfortunately, people who are basically treated inequitably or unfairly, sometimes they just leave. They could care less. And that is being experienced by many employers nowadays, unfortunately. So well-defined pay band or pay grades are a key element of the overall compensation strategy in terms of attracting top talent, motivation of those employees in the workplace, loyalty, their productivity, and their overall job satisfaction. So these are different categories that you can measure on an ongoing basis to see whether people are happy with their compensation or not. Ultimately, the key is for you and I to be informed research consumers. as masters of business and masters of human resource profession, when we read something that is published as a journal article or in a textbook, we should question it. Is the research useful? How useful are the variables? Does the research measure anything useful for you and I in the workplace today? How well are they measured? Does the study separate correlation from causation? The correlation coefficient do indicate or does indicate how changes in one variable relate to changes in another. For example, aging can be correlated to dying, but it does not necessarily mean that the main cause of an older person's death is their age. So again, correlation does not necessarily mean causation. Are the alternative explanations there? So the best way to establish causation is to account for competing explanations, either statistically or through control groups. Look at what the overall pattern of evidence and then judge the effects of pay on people's behaviors, satisfaction levels, productivity levels, loyalty, retention with the organization overall. So what are your views?
I know as a school principal, oftentimes we find great candidates. And what you find is that the different districts, of course, are competitive with one another. And so, for example, City Schools of Atlanta, just by its tax base alone, can afford to pay teachers much more. And so what you'll find is you can possibly attract, I work in a smaller district, a smaller suburban district, but you can attract those teachers, but unfortunately you're not able to keep them because the larger districts can offer more in the form of compensation, not necessarily benefits, because all of our benefits are pretty much the same, but definitely that compensation. And so I run into that all the time, so much so that when people come, I say, okay, I need you to check the pay scale, before you commit to me, because, we want to make sure that, this is something that you want. And they pay, they're doing a lot better paying competitively. It's not like when I started 28 years ago as an educator. Now a single person that is right out of college, that's an educator, can make somewhat of a decent salary, but you start adding kids and daycare and other things into that, then it becomes a challenge.
I wanted to add, in Northern Virginia, we're fortunate that our compensation, like Toya was saying, we have our benefit package is different from some of our surrounding systems. So that's a benefit that we have, because we have 2 retirement systems and many of our surrounding districts do not. So sometimes that puts us at an advantage.
Yeah, so that's a good point, because it's not just about the salaries or the cash that we receive, the money that we get on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, but the overall benefits and long-term benefits that do make a difference. Okay, any other thoughts, final thoughts? So I wish you good luck, and remember that compensation and benefit management must be rewarding and strategically designed. And we need to police, evaluate, and improve our rewarding skills every single opportunity that we get. More importantly, we need to audit our pay scales and compensation on a regular basis. This way, if we discover that somebody's not being paid fairly, we can make adjustments. We can apologize to that person and say, I'm sorry that you have not been paid equitably. Let us discuss how we can make it fairer in the months or years to come before you lose that person.